Hey, I'm Kira,
And I'm Carly.
and this is our presentation on economic development.
So, our least developed country is South Sudan.
And our most developed country is Germany. Here are some key terms that are important to know, like why economic development is uneven, sustainable development goals, which are basically a set of goals established by the United Nations to help an economy remain stable and prosperous for years to come. And then we also have barriers to economic growth and economic development, which are basically obstacles that an economy will face in trying to grow and change for the better.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, and in terms of the relationship between economic growth and development, of course, economic growth will lead to economic development, but some of those barriers play into that, such as the lack of access to things like new technologies or infrastructure, insurance or healthcare, and just things like that.
Okay, so here we have our economic summary, which is basically just a quick overview of, basic characteristics of the German economy and the economy of South Sudan. So really what makes Germany such a prosperous economy is the fact that they're such a large exporter. They dominate so many different industries, including precious metals, the automotive industry, coal, machinery, textiles, and pharmaceuticals. Unfortunately, they were not always this successful. Back during the World Wars, they struggled financially as their currency was valued at almost nothing.
So, South Sudan is known for its rich natural resources and prosperous land, but they rely mainly on its oil exports. And oil exports in South Sudan account for almost all of the country's export revenues. And a big barrier to their economic growth has been political unrest, such as hunger and poverty, issues with the government. They've really been struggling with that, as well as the COVID-19 epidemic.
Right, and I think that generally if they were able to solve this political unrest, that there would definitely be less hunger and poverty, and we'd see more exports in agriculture from South Sudan as the economy in its entirety.
As we know, the GDP is a good measure of economic well-being in a country, and Germany has a GDP of over 54,000, and South Sudan has a GDP of just over 1,000, which is a very substantial difference, and this represents the lack of economic growth and well-being in South Sudan.
Health and education can be big factors in deciding whether or not economy is a prosperous economy. Good indicators of education would be the literacy rate of the country, and a good indicator of health would be the life expectancy. Germany generally has a much higher literacy rate than South Sudan, and also a much higher life expectancy. Usually, if you have a high life expectancy, it means citizens have a great access to healthcare, insurance, and just more advanced medical technologies allowing them to live longer.
To measure economic and social inequality in both countries, we use the Inequality Adjusted Human Development Index. And with that, we could see that Germany still has a higher IHDI and South Sudan has a lower, meaning that inequality in South Sudan is worse, and they need to improve in that category.
So the Gender Inequality Index would be a good example of a economic or social inequality indicator. Germany has a GII value of 0.084, and South Sudan has a GII value of 0.842. gender inequality is an important thing to look at because it really contributes to unemployment and human capital. Generally, when you have more women in the workforce, your GDP is going to be higher and the income of those women is going to be higher. Energy indicators. So your EPI is your Energy Performance Index, which basically is determined by how you're following your sustainable development goals. So if you're following those, generally you're going to be having a higher EPI, and as we can see here, Germany does have a higher EPI than South Sudan, though both countries have a lot of room for improvement. So if you have a high Energy Performance Index, generally your environment's going to be characterized by a high biological diversity, which is very obviously a good thing.